personnel, formation, and motion.
Run the football, factor back.
We'll answer the question.
Passing game.
He caught it! He touchdown!
Lots of compelling matchups. Break it down. A spirited discussion. It's our chance to evaluate perfect matchup.
The blueprint for the Super Bowl.
Smash mouth football.
Rent space in a quarterback.
Sideline,
balance in their offense. Let's look at the match.
Attitude in the running. The quarterback is alive. To the factor back.
Very interesting watching tape.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the post-Super Bowl edition of Edge NFL Matchup, the show that uses game film to tell you what really happened. Trey Wingo here filling in for Suzy Kolber, along with the regulars, Ron Jaworski and Merrill Hodge. And, guys, before we get down to breaking down why Super Bowl 37 went Tampa Bay's way, your quick thoughts on the game.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Raiders.
Somebody say something.
The guy who picked the Raiders. I want to hear what he has to say.
It was nice to see that, you know what, nothing has changed in the National Football League as far as winning. The staples still exist. Everybody in the National Football League, including Mr. Jaworski over here, said, you know what, people are spreading out the passing game. People are throwing it 80-90% of the time. Well, you know what?
I never went that high.
It goes to show you that staples win the game. Physical domination. You cannot create that in the passing game. The Bucs did it with their running game and an awesome defense.
Well, I agree. They were physical in the football game. But remember this. First 15 plays scripted, 10 passes, 5 runs. The Bucs
resulted in how many points?
Wait. The Bucs clearly did establish their superiority. See, don't start jumping on the bandwagon. You picked the Raiders. Now you want to come over right now. But what happened is when you look at this game, I think it was the constant physical and mental pressure that the Bucs applied to the Raiders.
Well, there's no question about it. And a lot of talk was made about the fact this was the first time you had a number one offense against a number one defense in the NFL in the Super Bowl. But consider this. This was the 9th time you had a top 3 offense taking on a top 3 defense in the Super Bowl. All 9 times that top 3 defense has taken the game. And clearly, that was the story of Super Bowl 37. A lot of talk made about Barrett Robbins missing at center for the Oakland Raiders. But, Jaws, when you look early in the game, as we take you through the game chronologically, it was pressure from the ends that really got Oakland rattled.
Yeah, and first of all, let me mention Adam True. You talked about Barrett Robbins not being there. Adam True filled in, and I went through the game tape and watched him on every play. And he had a tremendous football game. They did not lose the game because Barrett Robbins did not play in the game. Clearly, I thought where the Buccaneers defense dominated was on the edges. It was clear that their speed and their quickness and agility were just too much for the Oakland Raiders. And particularly early in the football game, the pace was set when the Bucs got pressure on the quarterback.
It's the Raiders' first series, 3rd and 7 on the Bucs' 16. The Bucs show blitz, so Gannon, reacting to what he initially sees, audibles to a mirrored slant-flat route combination, a high percentage throw for Rich against man coverage. The Bucs see the check and make a check of their own. They go from a pressure man look to a cover 2 shell zone look, with only their 4 down linemen rushing. Gannon will look to Porter on the quick slant, but the strength of this 2 deep zone coverage takes that initial window away. As this route continues further upfield, the second window, which is a void in this coverage, opens up. Given time, Gannon makes this throw, and it would have been a touchdown, making it 7-0 Raiders. That takes us to Simeon Rice, working against Barry Sims. Rice is a speed rusher, an edge rusher, so Sims anticipates that and overcompensates. Rice, with a great swim move, beats him to the inside. The coverage, as you saw, closed the first window. Rice's quick inside pressure took away Gannon's opportunity to get to the second window.
Now, that was the Bucs' biggest defensive play to that point of the game. But the biggest offensive play to that point in the game early in the first quarter was Michael Pittman's 23-yard run. Now,
I can't believe it.
The factor back's going to talk to you for a second, but I'm going to get supported by Roman Oben, the offensive tackle for the Bucs. He was in the locker room, and I was talking to him about the pressures they were giving up early in the game. He said, you know what, Merrill, what helped us stabilize us, we started to run the rock. You got to love that, man. We started to run the rock. And then it helped them. It eased them out, and it became more of a balance. But you look at the Bucs, the one targeted area that they had coming into this game, they were going to attack the edges. And the first time they had an opportunity to attack the edges of the Raiders, they were very successful. This was the second Bucs drive of the game. It's 1st and 10. On this toss left, Ken Dilger motions across the formation behind Keyshawn, who is aligned tight to the formation. This sets up the blocking scheme. Keyshawn takes care of the first level of the defense, pinning Reagan Upshaw. That's a wide receiver physically handling a defensive end. Dilger seals the second level, preventing linebacker Eric Barton from fast flowing to the play. Those two blocks allow Michael Pittman to turn the corner cleanly and create a clean and unimpeded path for Mike Allstott to kick out safety Anthony Dorsett. From the end zone angle, you can really see how each of these blocks takes care of the three levels of the Raiders' defense. The Bucs believed they could get to the perimeter with their running game. This 23-yard gain by Pittman was their first toss. It set the tone for their offense. That was the biggest offensive play for the Bucs in the first quarter, but it also set the tone. You move to the second quarter. Right after a big punt return, the Bucs come out and they run the ball 4 straight times, resulting in a touchdown, meaning points come out of the running game as well, because what'd you say, the first 15 plays, there were 10 passes. They couldn't get in the end zone. They lined up with the Raiders. They created a physical dominance. That run on the edge also created confidence, because they knew they wanted to attack there, but they didn't know if they'd have success. Well, bam, as soon as you get that 23-yard run, you go, we got him now. We can run at him, and they physically dominate him. And you know what? You can't do that in the passing game. You never hear people go, you know what? We physically dominated people throwing the football. It doesn't happen that way. That's why the staples of football won this championship for the Bucs: running the football and super defense.
Okay, and we'll get into the touchdown passes a little bit later in the show.
Game's over when they start scoring
No,
those.
they weren't. There was one before the half and one the first drive of the second half. But I do like that the way that the Buccaneers ran the football. They used the misdirection plays. They were able to get the double teams and the fast flow linebackers of the Raiders moved away from the initial movement, and that created the seams for the running backs of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Haji was right. They did have some good runs.
And if you look at the Bucs season, they were most dominant all season long when they did have that running game. And it was surprising that it came from Michael Pittman. Over 100 yards in the Super Bowl. A hometown boy from San Diego. In his first 3 games when he played for the Cardinals, he had 200-yard games. The Super Bowl, his first 100-yard outing since those first 3. Timing's everything, especially in front of the hometown. All right, stay with us. When we come back on Edge NFL Matchup, we'll switch to the other side of the ball. Dexter Jackson, the MVP, and now his 2 picks turned around the game. Stay with us. And welcome back to Edge NFL Matchup as we continue to look at Super Bowl 37 and to show you just how dominant that Tampa Bay defense was. When the score was tied at 3, the next 5 Oakland Raider possessions all ended in 3 and outs. 2 by picks, 3 by punts. By the time those 5 3 and outs were done, suddenly the ball game was 20-3. And Jaws, when you look at the first 10 possessions of the Oakland Raiders, those 10 possessions, 36 plays, 78 yards. That pressure up front really had Rich Gannon guessing what the secondary was going to do, and that's where the Bucs cashed in big time.
You're absolutely right. And pass defense is a combination of coverage and pass rush pressure. And clearly, the Buccaneers were in sync in both of those departments. And going into the game, we all thought one of the big matchups would be Jerry Porter against Rondé Barber in the slot. And breaking down the tape, Jerry Porter did have some opportunities for big plays, but the pressure got to him, and that really was the key, the consistent pressure that was put on Rich Gannon. But also the fact that once Gannon did break the pocket, I always said he's the best ad-lib quarterback in the game. He makes plays with his movement outside the pocket. When he moved outside the pocket, those Buccaneers secondary guys, they stuck and they stayed.
It's 3rd and 2 at the end of the first quarter. The Raiders are in Bucs territory. Tampa is playing man coverage with John Lynch, the free help, in the deep middle. The matchup to focus on is Jerry Porter versus Rondé Barber. Porter will be running a corner route away from Lynch in order to isolate Barber. And you'll see that's where Gannon's read takes him. With a great release, Porter immediately beats Barber to the outside. The Raiders got the one-on-one matchup, and Porter won. So why didn't he get the football? Gannon needs to plant on his 5th step to time up with Porter's route. Again, watch Rice working against Sims. Again, he beats the tackle to the inside, this time with a spin move. Gannon can't even get to his 5th step and is forced to move under extreme pressure. And this is where the speed of the Bucs defense breaks you down. Again, the route beat the coverage, but the Raiders could not protect. Another big play opportunity missed because Simeon Rice set the tone with his pass rush.
We're not done talking about the MVP of the Super Bowl yet, Dexter Jackson. We got to talk about his second interception. But before we get to that, all year when I talk to defensive coordinators about Rich Gannon and the Raider offense, the number one thing they said, man, you cannot let Rich Gannon beat you on the pump fake. That's why the Titans played zero coverage. with no safety. They just played man because they didn't want that deep safety to be influenced. And when you look at Dexter Jackson's second interception, he was not fooled by Rich Gannon's pump fake. That's why he got his second interception. It's 6-3 Bucks with more than 10 minutes left in the second quarter. Tampa shows a cover 2 look with John Lynch and Dexter Jackson each positioned in their deep halves. Before the snap, the Bucks move. Rondé Barber steps up to show blitz off the 3-receiver side. Lynch drops down to replace Barber over the slot. And Jackson ends up in the deep middle as the single safety. Here's what Rich Gannon is trying to get. Jerry Porter down the seam. It doesn't matter if Lynch runs with Porter in man coverage or passes Porter on as part of a zone scheme. Gannon's responsibility is to influence the single safety. He must move Jackson with his head, his eyes, and his arm. Watch Gannon. He immediately looks left and pump fakes to the left before coming back to Porter. And we've seen Gannon manipulate safeties every week this season. Watch Jackson. I don't think any play demonstrates the Bucks coverage discipline more than this one. You can take all the disguise and all the pre-snap movement and throw it out the window. Gannon saw the single safety look, and based on his experience this season, had no doubt that Jackson would react to his pump fake.
Merrill, you're absolutely right. Discipline is the foundation of the Buccaneers' success. And the one thing they do a great job of is spot dropping. As soon as they see pass, they will go to that landmark, look back in the backfield, and try to read the quarterback's eyes. Obviously, 5 interceptions. They did that very well, Trey.
Yeah, and to show you how uncharacteristic that was for Rich Gannon. During the 16-game season, Rich Gannon only threw 10 picks, and then the Super Bowl record 5. 3 of them returned to the house. Clearly not the day he was looking for after finally getting to the Super Bowl. All right, stay with us. When we come back, we'll take a look at how the Bucs offense really hammered the Raiders defense that may have put Super Bowl 37 away for good. Stay with us. And welcome back to the post-Super Bowl edition of Edge NFL Matchup. So much attention going into this game about the #1 Raider offense, the #1 Tampa defense. But it was really the other matchup, Tampa Bay's offense against the Raiders defense, that really swung this game. And it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Well, actually, Tampa's offense did both great. They finished the first half with a long touchdown drive. They started the second half with a long touchdown drive. And that was when the Raiders had to be thinking, I don't think we're going to win this game.
Yeah, and both of those drives were balanced. And contrary to what my friend Mr. Hodge always says, that I'm a throw ball guy, you must have balance on offense. And those 2 drives, that's exactly what the Buccaneers
Now, wait a minute. Before I let you get going here, and all our fans out there, everybody that watches the show, they always hear John, 82% of the time they throw the football.
That's high.
79% of the time.
But
you don't hear balance.
No, what you always hear is points come out of the pass game, and both those drives ended in touchdown passes, by the way.
Running game established that early in that game.
If you look at the 10-play drive, just before the half, 5 called passes, 5 called runs. You look at the first drive of the second half, 14 plays, 7 called passes, 7 called runs. The 12 called runs in those 2 drives produced 35 yards. The 12 called passes, 126 yards. Of course, there were 15 penalty yards in there as well.
Playbook on a running
but there
game.
were 2 touchdown passes. You are correct. But you look at John Gruden and what he does with the design of his offense. He always looks for someone to attack. You think back to last week, Philadelphia championship game. They singled out Barry Gardner, the Eagles linebacker. They got big plays against him. In the Super Bowl matchup, they attacked the Raiders safeties.
This is 2nd and 11 from the Raiders' 47. Keyshawn is split wide left. His deep post will lift Torrey James, the outside deep defender in the Raiders' quarters coverage scheme. Joe Juravicius is split right, tighter to the formation. The reason? His intermediate crossing route must complement Keyshawn's post on that side of the field. Safety Rod Woodson is the read for Brad Johnson. If Woodson stays low, looking to hunt up Juravicius on the cross, Brad goes over the top to the post. If Woodson turns and runs with Keyshawn, Brad has Juravicius. So the Bucs are in essence high-lowing Woodson, who will bail to defend Keyshawn's post. That leaves Anthony Dorsett in a position to have to run with Juravicius across the field. You can see that Juravicius easily runs away from Dorsett to the void in the quarters coverage. The Bucs felt going in that they could attack and break down Woodson and Dorsett in coverage. On their longest pass play of Super Bowl 37, they did just that. Same drive, 2nd and goal from the 8. It's trips left out of a bunch set. McCardell is number 1, Juravicius is number 2, and Dilger is number 3. The Raiders match up with 4 over 3. Here's how they play it. Nickelback Terran Shaw is playing Jurevicius man-to-man, and linebacker Bill Romanowski is locked on Dilger. That leaves corner James and safety Dorsett playing in and out on McCardell, depending on Keenan's release. You see where this is going. An inside release puts Dorsett man-to-man on McCardell in the middle of the field, with no help around him. With Dilger and Jurevicius releasing to the outside, Dorsett is left on an island versus McCardell. Again, the Bucs dictated a mismatch, forcing the Raiders' safeties to cover. Classic Gruden. The illusion of complexity produced a simple pitch-and-catch touchdown.
Classic Gruden also understands when you have balance, you create frustration in a defense. I'll give you a prime example of frustration. Players like to go do their own thing. They jump outside the scheme. It was very evident in the fourth quarter. Now, the Raiders have already won on first down. They got them 2nd and 10. The score is 34-15. It's the first drive of the fourth quarter. Here comes Charles Woodson off a corner, a cat blitz. He's not supposed to blitz. In fact, you see Chuck Bresnahan, the defensive coordinator, go, "What are you doing?" Because Keyshawn's wide open. They hit Keyshawn. They get a first down. That's the type of mistakes the Raiders started to make because they were frustrated by what Tampa's offense was doing to them.
That's lack of discipline.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you want to talk about lack of balance, which has been so much of this segment. The Raiders, 11 attempts for 19 yards. No one's going to win a Super Bowl if you don't get at least 20 yards rushing or more than at least 11 carries on the ground. All right, stay with us when we come back on Edge NFL Matchup. The man who would be Super Bowl MVP, Dwight Smith, the first of his 2 picks, taken back to the house. Stay with us.
Gannon read Archuleta early and knew that there were 5 defenders to the trip side against his 3 receivers. He intuitively will look backside, knowing there is now only one underneath defender to play Garner and Jerry Rice. The corner, now forced to react to Garner, abandons his outside responsibility. Gannon starts front side and comes all the way across the field backside. That's hard to do. The Bucs underneath zone discipline from sideline to sideline will be tested for 4 quarters by Gannon's patience and vision.
Sometimes a man's got to do what a man's got to do. And as we saw on the tape there, Merrill Hodge explaining how you can beat Rich Gannon by playing disciplined defense. And there you saw it right there.
Thanks, Trey.
You served it up for us.
20 weeks, he got 1 right. Good job.
Let's move on. I got indigestion just thinking about that. But, you know, outside of Jerry Porter, the Raiders wideout, everyone thought that Tampa Bay's defense was dominant in that game. How dominant? The Bucs defense actually outscored the #1 offense in the NFL, 21-14. Merrill, in the second half, every time you looked over, you saw Buccaneer going that way with a touchdown. I mean, it was ridiculous how dominant they were.
Well, we felt going to the Super Bowl, you know, the Raiders would challenge your discipline. In zone coverage, they always give you routes, and they force you to jump a route, or they force you to go out of your zone coverage responsibilities. In fact, Dwight Smith's first interception was a combination of being disciplined and understanding Rich Gannon's strengths and weaknesses.
Third quarter, 5 minutes left. Here's the ripple effect Simeon Rice had on the Raiders' offense. Charlie Garner, the most explosive player on the field, is reduced to a blocker first and a route runner second. All because the Raiders' protection schemes often left Barry Sims singled up on Rice. Want to see this play in its entirety? Here it is. This will be a mirrored smash combination on each side, with Gannon's initial read to the right. But tight end Doug Jolly will get jammed by Greg Spires, delaying his release and disrupting the timing of the route combination that is designed to high-low corner Brian Kelly. At this point, notice the depth of Jolly's flag route compared to Porter's depth on the backside. This forces Gannon to look backside, something we've seen him do successfully many times this season. The smash combination on the backside looks to be timing up perfectly, but corner Dwight Smith is in great position to discourage the flag throw and encourage the hitch. Where other defenses break down, especially on the backside, this defense did not. Smith sees it, baits it, and picks it off. This was outstanding discipline and execution by Smith. That's the defining signature of this Bucs defense and the overriding reason they dominated a one-dimensional Raider offense.
The Raiders played buck ball. They just threw the football and they paid the price. In fact, one of the great matchups in this game was going to be Charlie Garner. How were they going to handle him? Studying the tape, what they did is they blitz engaged. They blitzed Charlie Garner, forced him to stay in. But instead of going after Rich Gannon, you just see him hug up, grab the ball of Charlie Garner, and keep him there. That's how they took care of Charlie Garner as well. And then you mentioned Simeon Rice. He was getting after it, and then Charlie Garner had to start chipping. So he had to be an extra blocker as well. That's why we didn't see a lot of Charlie Garner.
You mentioned Charlie Garner. He may have summed up everything that went wrong for the Raiders in Super Bowl 37 with this one sentence about the Buccaneers. Quote, they outquicked us in everything they did. And that was certainly the case at the point of attack. Everywhere they needed to be, it seemed like the Bucs got there first. All right, guys, final thoughts on Super Bowl 37 standing out in your mind?
Well, you know what's interesting? Merrill and I get a chance to come in and break down the coach's tape and see how every single player played. And two guys stood out for me for the Bucs. First on defense, Greg Spires. People want to talk about Sapp and Rice and obviously Dexter Jackson and Dwight Smith making big plays. I thought the most disruptive guy for the Buccaneers was defensive end Greg Spires. On the offensive side of the ball, I know you're going to love this, Merrill. It was a factor back. It was Mike Allstott. I believe it was his most complete game as a Buccaneer. Running the football, catching the football, and yes, blocking.
And I think you would agree with me because you did the Bucs preseason games. In fact, I did their last preseason game. If there was one question mark going into the season, it was their offensive line. And you talk about a unit that come together. Even during the course of that game, they struggled early, but then they settled down and they physically dominated the Raiders. In fact, I went to both locker rooms, and I walked in the Raider locker room. I almost forgot about all the bruises and scars and scratches that you see on players. Raiders had a ton of them. Very few of those on the Buc players.
Yeah, very surprising, too, when you look at the size advantage that the Raiders had up front with Adams and John Perella. You really thought that's a place where they could take advantage.
No, always said, first contact wins. Doesn't matter how big or small you are, first contact wins. And you already heard it. Charlie Garner said it.
And the Bucs ran a lot of tosses. I believe they tired that defense out of the Raiders.
Well, they certainly did. Well, this has been our privilege to give you Edge NFL matchup all season long. I'm going to thank some special people that helped us put this show together. Mark Shimolinski, Kevin Foley, Wayne Riley, Sally Miller, Gina Francesco, who makes us all look good. And that's not easy. Shane McMartin, Jonas Landau, John Lopes, John Graham, Brad Perch, and Kirsten Watson.
Yeah,
For Suzy Kolber,
Greg Cosell, the king.
The voice. The voice of the universe, Greg Cosell. Suzy Kolber is not here, so she's thanking you as well. For Suzy, I'm Trey Wingo. We all know him as Ron Jaworski. Merrill Hodge, thanks for being part of Edge NFL Matchup this year, and we'll see you next season. Take care.